Welcome back to Indaba Africa, folks. This is Chris on Chris White Africa on the Indaba Africa channel, coming to you live from central Pennsylvania. It's a great pleasure to have you here once again today. Join us today. We have a special featured guest, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. But we're going to talk a little bit about events that took place in Brackenfell. Also talk about politics in the Western Cape and in the Cape as a whole. You know, it's not just the Western Cape, the Northern Eastern Cape, also part of what used to be known as the Cape Colony back in the day. We'll talk about that as well with my guest, who is the leader of a political party located in South Africa. We're going to talk a little bit about direct elections versus direct democracy, things like that. And without any further ado, let me go ahead and welcome my guest in. My guest today is Jack Miller from the Cape Party.
Hi there, Chris. Very good to be with you.
It's a pleasure, Jack. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the quick response, too, by the way. I mean, I just asked you a short time ago, could you come on the channel? You're like, sure, absolutely. Happy to do it. So first off, for those outside South Africa, and that's a significant portion of my audience, we should probably start with saying that what the heck is the Cape Party? I mean, it's we hear, before you answer that, there's a lot of rumblings around the world, some of the news getting out about all these different secession movements in the Cape, including Cape Exit, the United Liberty Alliance, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. That's at least three of them that many people know about, even people outside South Africa. That's not what we're talking about here, although your party may or may not be in favor. We'll talk about that. But you formed a political party, I think about in 2007, the Cape Party, and that's what we're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We formed the Cape Party in 2007 out of a complete and utter disillusionment with where the country was going. We were sold a dream of a rainbow nation in 1994, and by 2007, it was very clear that we had anything but a rainbow nation. And today, you don't even hear the ANC or the EFF talking about this term. Quite the contrary. All we hear is how non-blacks don't belong, not only in South Africa, but on the African continent. They're talking about expropriation without compensation. There are various institutional policies which discriminate people based upon their skin color. The Afrikaans language, which is the majority language in the Cape, is also discriminated against. So, we believe that we can have a rainbow nation in what is the most ethnically diverse region in South Africa, and in fact, many parts of the world, right here in the Cape. And we are pushing, well, first of all, we'd like to negotiate with the ANC and EFF if they are willing to pull back on a lot of their discriminatory policies. Off air, we're talking about the taxation system. So we certainly need to stop this daylight robbery, which is taking place with our taxes. And if we can negotiate on some of those things and get a more of a federal system, then that's something, we would be, that's the first point of discussion. But if the ANC and the EFF will not negotiate with us on those bases, then we will push for a referendum. And if the majority of the people in the Western Cape vote in favor in that referendum, we will declare the Cape an independent country.
Now, these different movements out there all are moving into, I don't want to say different beat, but they're all moving along, all ostensibly trying to achieve the same sort of thing, Cape secession. They've got different approaches. There are different stages. I think United Liberty Alliance is the oldest. They've been around the longest. Cape Exit came out of that, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've also got the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. In fact, on the 5th of December, there'll be a march by Cape Independent Advocacy Group for Cape secession. Does your party have any affiliation with any of these groups, or do you have any cross membership, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you said the ULA was the oldest, with ourselves included, or of the non-political groups. I think
of the non-political groups.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started in 2007, we were the lone voice, and we're incredibly happy to see over the last 3 years these many different other groups emerging, and yes, we do have good relationships with pretty much all of them. We have working relationships. In fact, there's an entity called the Cape Independence Forum, which we were pushing for some while, which includes all of these different groups. And we're very happy to say that, yeah, we meet on a regular basis online and discuss, events that we're involved in and things we're pushing for. So This Cape Independence March on the 5th of December is something that we will be supporting the CIAG on, and a number of the other groups that you mentioned will also be attending that march. So yes, we do work together. Obviously, as a political party, we believe, we have our belief that in order to achieve Cape independence, we need to force the South African government into a position where they legally have no other option to grant us a referendum on independence. Some of the other groups take the pathway that through pressure from a petition or lobbying international support, and we're in favor of all of these methods. So let it not come across that we're not. We support all of these methods, and we love that these organizations are doing it. We just feel that if you look at secession movements around the world, you look at Brexit, you look at the Catalonian movement, you look at the Quebec secession movement, the Scottish secession movement, Sudanese independence, and you look how secession takes place all around the world, it invariably comes through the legal and political pressure that comes through forcing the government at the ballot box to give you a referendum. And that's why the pathway which we're going on to get that referendum is to drive the DA underneath 50% in the Western Cape. The Premier of a province has the constitutional right to call a referendum. So the DA is not willing to do that. They've had a majority control over the Western Cape for more than a decade. And they have national ambitions. They believe that they can beat the ANC on a national election. Everyone knows that this is impossible. And I think they're starting to realize this reality too. But they have donors, they have supporters outside of the Western Cape. So they know where their bread is buttered. We need to force them underneath 50%. If they're sitting at 49, 48%, let's say the Cape Party is 2, 3, 4%, we can then say, listen, DA, we will give you the majority, and all we want is one thing and one thing only, and that is a referendum on independence for the Western Cape. So that is the legal and political pathway which we believe is going to be the most effective in achieving this.
Well, that's interesting, and already I'm glad I'm having the conversation with you because I've already learned something useful. But very quickly, just to address some chat here. Yes, this is a Western Province jersey, in case anybody's curious. I'm a Stormers Western Province fan through and through, always have been. Not so thrilled with the so-called domestic Super Rugby, which the Bulls just won under Jake White, but congratulations to the Bulls. Yeah, it's a Western Province jersey. I usually wear my Stormers, but today I figured since we're talking about the Cape, I wear my Province jersey. But yeah, there's a few questions in chat. I've sent another message back to one of the folks. They're asking how much it's going to cost. I want to know what they mean, but it's interesting. So I don't want to make any assumptions here. So as a Cape party, you're a political party, you're registered in South Africa, you've run for elections. I think you were in 2009, in 2014, and 2019, you ran all those. Yeah, I checked the vote totals. You went from 2,200 to like 4,400 to almost 10,000 in the last election. So the party has been growing. But are you adamantly opposed or to remaining in South Africa, or do you see the only path forward is Cape secession? In other words, what I'm getting at is if in 2021, let's do a what if, okay? 2021, the Cape Party catches fire, gets a lot of attention, and you gain enough votes to win a few municipalities, say in smaller towns in Western Cape. Would you want to stick on the path that you're a party within South Africa, or would you still be interested in pursuing this autonomy and self-determination?
No, I think the everything we stand for is intrinsic in our name. We are custom built to fight exclusively for the Cape and the Cape alone. We have no interest in contesting in other parts of the country, and in fact, we've got very good relationships with independence movements in other parts of the country. We've met with the Abu Tembu royal family. They came down to Cape Town. We had a good meeting a number of years ago. We've given them our support. So this is a part of the Eastern Cape that would like to be independent. They belong to the Khoza tribe. We've got good relationships, very good relationships with many Zulus. There's a strong secessionist movement in KwaZulu-Natal. There's something called the Ingonyama Trust, which the Zulu King Zwelithini owns and controls on behalf of the Zulu people. And the ANC government, with their typical communist socialist ideology, wants to control everything themselves and reap centralized rewards. So the Zulus are not very happy with some of the ANC policies. So there is a strong movement in KwaZulu-Natal for independence. We've also been contacted by Sothos and Lesotho who want to expand the territory. They feel that they got hard done by in 1962 and 1964 when Lesotho and Swaziland were granted independence. There are Tswanas in the north of South Africa which want to rejoin with Botswana, and as you can see from all these names, these are our cultural nation states. So KwaZulu-Natal is predominantly Zulu speaking. Botswana is predominantly Tswana speaking. Lesotho is predominantly Sotho speaking. Swaziland is predominantly Swazi speaking. So these are all cultural nation states. And the Cape for almost 400 years has had an identity that is very different to other parts of South Africa. And we want to have good neighborly relations with all of our neighbors, which is why one of the countries which we would model an independent Cape on is Switzerland. Switzerland is not a country. In fact, it's 26 independent countries called cantons. We would want to see the Cape Republic governed through a Swiss type cantonal system, basically municipalities, for those who are more familiar with the local terminology here, a municipality system where municipalities would be the most powerful voice in the community with regards to policies, taxes, belief systems, etc. So you will have areas which will be majority Afrikaans speaking, you'll have other areas that are majority English speaking, other areas that are majority Christian or Muslim, etc. And those various communities should be able to shape policies according to their own communities. And this is how Switzerland survived World War I and World War II without firing a single bullet at each other. You had French, Italians, Germans, and Romansk living in Switzerland, and where genocide was taking place outside of the borders between Germans and French and Italians, not a single bullet was fired in Switzerland because they believe in the policy of respecting your neighbor. So this is something we'd like to see in an independent Cape.
David Clark just subscribed. Thank you for that, David. Well, that's true, but we also have to point out that one of the reasons why Switzerland was never attacked by its neighbors is because they have deterrence. In fact, the Swiss famously shot down more German aircraft than the French did. No, I'm embellishing, but the Swiss shot down several German aircraft that violated their airspace, as well as Allied aircraft, and imprisoned their pilots and crews through the duration of the war. So yeah, no, they armed neutrality. I've been to Switzerland hundreds of times, lived near there. They have bases built into the mountains, and they roll jet fighters out of the mountains, and it's just everyone's armed. You stay in the reserve until the 50s. They've tried several times, the leftists in that country, to get rid of the military, and they're just a bunch of morons. Each time they put up to referendum, the public has overwhelmingly said, nope, we are keeping a military. It's one of the reasons for resistance. So yeah, what you say I believe is true, but we got to say that the deterrence definitely played a role keeping them out of the conflict too. So you mentioned all these other groups, like, for instance, I imagine like the Bafokeng up there around Rustenburg, or very close to the border of Botswana. Of course, on that side of the border where I used to live in Botswana, it's called Setswana, but it's essentially the same language, Tswana. And most of the Tswana speakers are in South Africa, but there is a significant number in Botswana. So yeah, I can see that tie. And you're right about the Basotho people. They definitely were done hard over about their borders. And most of the productive land that they had fell to Trek Boers and then to others, and then eventually became part of South Africa and not part of Lesotho. So I can see where you're going with that. So autonomy is really what you're looking for here. Now, I did find it interesting looking up your party that you guys had talked about direct elections, direct democracy. Now, I should be clear, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. Direct democracy to me is New England-style town hall meetings where everybody goes and everybody can vote on an issue. That's direct democracy rather than representative democracy, which is what most countries have. Now, you're not talking about direct elections, or are you also interested in that?
No, specifically we're talking about direct democracy, where the highest authority is not the president or any elected council. Essentially, every single policy in the country can be overturned by a vote at the will of the people. So you don't get a system where 200 politicians get bribed by multinational corporations to pass certain laws which benefit them and their cronies. if that is to happen, then all you have is either a referendum, initiative, recall, nullification, or voluntary secession. Those are the 5 direct democracy checks and balances that keep a government accountable. So, yeah, a referendum will obviously be to ratify any law or policy that the citizens want. An initiative is to propose a new law that has not yet been introduced. So a certain number of signatures will be required to create that initiative, which then would go to a referendum. A recall is when a politician is found guilty of corruption or any charges, and then a vote takes place to remove that politician. And invariably what follows is that politician faces criminal time, which would be an absolute anomaly here in South Africa. I don't think politicians even know what that is.
No.
Referendum, initiative, recall. Yeah, nullification. Nullification is a very important one, because a society should have fluid elements to it. So you can introduce a policy and it might sound good, which is so often the case with socialist policies, and which is why socialism is so appealing to many people. They use these emotive issues, which sound good, but invariably result in economic collapse and destruction, end up harming the people that they're trying to help. So you can put a law in place, and then through a nullification referendum, you can then retract those laws if they aren't working. So let's say people want to increase the taxes to 20% because they think that'll help the community, and then they find out by increasing the taxes, in fact, it's choking businesses, and then unemployment increases, etc. Then people can go, okay, no, that was a bad idea. Let's reduce taxes, or let's increase the speed limit on this road. Let's reduce the speed limit there. Let's increase the driving age. Let's increase the voting age, whatever it might be. So all of these things should be flexible. And then voluntary secession is the final pillar, which basically, if for whatever reason a state gets out of control, the people themselves should be able to decide, look, thank you, but no thank you. You guys are more than welcome to live the way you want to live. But we in our community here, we believe in different values. And so we are going to form our own administrative region here and govern ourselves.
There is a question by Lars Solis to me. I'll just answer that very quickly, and then I'll get back to something I want to ask you about here. But Lars Solis said, where's it at? Can you see if you can speak to the Amatembu and also the Zulu? Happy to do it. I just need contact folks. Here you go. Here's an exclusive. No one knows this, but I did get confirmation this morning that Bantu Holomisa will be on my channel. He's agreed to come on the channel from the UDM. I'll be talking to him probably next week, depending on the scheduling. I was supposed to be in Ghana next week, but the outrageously ridiculous, you must have a negative COVID test within 72 hours, which is impossible to go to Africa. I was denied a COVID test by my healthcare provider from the Army because I'm retired. They said, no, we don't do that. You have to go elsewhere. And I said, how long do the results take? 2 to 4 days. I'm like, don't you have rapid test kits? We have those for HIV. Yeah, but they're not reliable. I said, I don't care if they're reliable. I don't have COVID. I just need to get on a plane. Anyway, so long story short, I can't get a COVID test and rock up to an airport, fly to Europe, and then on to Ghana and get there within 72 hours. So I can't go to Ghana. But anyway, yeah, so Bantu Holomisa will be on the channel next week. I just don't know which day because I've got to schedule. Instead of going to Ghana, I'm going to have to do Zoom with the people there for the event I was supposed to do. So I'll have to set the times up for that. Sorry, that's a little bit away from our discussion there, Jack, but I've been asked about getting other people from some of these different groups on there. So I just wanted to share that. So back to your party and what we're talking about here. You talked about like language, the commonality, culture. You mentioned the Tswana speakers, the Siswati, the Basutu, and others like that. And you also, those who speak Afrikaans in the Western Cape, which is the majority language. About 50% of the population is colored, and almost all of them speak Afrikaans. About 17% is white. Probably, I'd say about half those speak Afrikaans as a first language. So there you have a majority, as you said. And there are also blacks who speak it as a first language in that region. A lot of people have been running around talking about the farm murders, the plasmord, for a number of years, calling it genocide. I've never said that. I've said it's a horrific thing that needs to be addressed, and the government's ignoring it. But one thing I think is fair to make a statement is there seems to be this clear effort by the ANC at cultural genocide, particularly with the Afrikaans language. I mean, the most iconic of higher institution of higher learning, Stellenbosch, where the median was Afrikaans, that's no longer the case. They've effectively stamped it out at a school where the land was granted based on it being an institution into perpetuity, where they taught Afrikaans at that level. It seems quite odd to me that they're on this rage because they alienate 7 to 9 million coloreds instantly because most of them speak Afrikaans as the first language, plus 2.8 million white South Africans. Am I missing something, Jack, or am I off the mark here?
You and me both. I don't know what we're missing. It's insane. It's that, well, you said it. It's cultural genocide. They're trying to destroy, and it's not just the Cape culture. And this is why there are secession movements in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. All cultures. This is what this communist ideology does. Is it breaks down your identity. They want to turn everyone into a gray mass. And people aren't standing for it. So yeah, Afrikaans in Stellenbosch and the whole of the Cape is under severe attack. One of the proudest days for the Zulu people is Shakazulu Day, which has now been relegated to Braai Day, and the government's doing everything that they can to destroy the identity, not just of the Cape, but various different other groups. We're obviously in the most serious crossfire. It suits their agenda very well to blame Afrikaans, to blame white people, to blame non-black people, and the non-black population in the Cape is almost 70%, as you pointed out earlier. The ANC and the EFF and all other African nationalist parties have struggled for the last 26 years to get anywhere above 35%. They have no foothold here. Mm-hmm. So for the foreseeable future, these African nationalist organizations will never win an election in the Western Cape. So as a result of that, we're targeted politically, we're targeted economically, and we're targeted culturally.
No, it seems to be without a doubt. And then you're correct. It's not simply relegated to Afrikaans. That's where the push has been for 15 years. But you see it now in other instances too, also with the Zulu and other places. But I mean, this is right out of the playbook. This is the rules for radicals. This is what the communists and socialists do. I mean, they bifurcate people, divide you, even amongst people who have the same religion, the same ethnicities. They'll find ways to divide you. Look what they did in the Ukraine, calling poor peasant farmers kulaks. As you know, kulak, of course, is a wealthy farmer. So if you had a chicken and a goat, you were a kulak, which meant you went to the gulag and never came back. It's horrific. But I mean, that's what they do. It's what they do. And so it shouldn't surprise people that this is the agenda of the ANC.
Yeah. And on that note, for those listeners who might not be familiar with South Africa's history, let's just look at the name. South Africa is not the name of a country.
It's a geographic location.
100%. It's a geographical location. We're on the African continent, down in the bottom. And it was the British Empire which forced us in 1910 into the Union of South Africa. You can just see the British Empire sitting there. Okay, look, they've got gold in the Vaal region. They've got diamonds in Kimberley. We want to consolidate our powers down there and unify them under one governing administrative body. Let's call them the Union of South Africa, and union is the key word. And this is where Brexit has come in. It's a breaking away from the European Union, the United Kingdom, Scotland wanting to break away from England. These movements are all over the world, and so the Union of South Africa, which then became just South Africa, is an artificial construct. So this is where the Cape Party actually agrees with the EFF and many other of these African nationalist organizations, where they blame the ills of today on colonialism, and where we absolutely agree is that one of the greatest colonial mistakes, not just in South Africa but actually many parts of Africa, is these artificial borders which completely disregard different cultural groups, religious groups, ethnic groups, language groups, and force them into these completely arbitrary political constructs. And invariably what happens, like we saw in Rwanda, with the Hutus and the Tutsis, the majority tribe takes over, they collect all the taxes, they put their tribe into the military has all the guns, and they end up slaughtering their tribal enemies. on mass proportions. And this is something we've seen throughout the African continent, and it's an absolute shame. So we agree with those African nationalist groups. Colonialism needs to come to an end in South Africa, and we need to do away with this British Empire construct, which forced us into this union, and return independence to the various regions and provinces of South Africa.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the thing that gets lost on people is the Union of South Africa Act from 1910, an act of British Parliament, which created the country of South Africa, which didn't really become an actual independent country until 1960, 61, something like that. But anyway, yeah, no, that Union of South Africa Act still lingers with us today. In fact, it was the basis at the CODESA, the Convention for Democratic South Africa, to resolve land disputes, talking about no disputes would be valid before 1910. Which in my mind was reasonable. That's lost to history. That's if you have a land dispute where land was taken from you, it occurred after the Union of South Africa Act. Anything prior to that is a consequence of conquest or settlement. And, you know, people hate this, Jack, but they hate to admit this, but war is a legitimate form of political discourse. It may be distasteful and undesirable, but it is a legitimate form of political discourse. And those Bantu tribes who came down the Rift Valley and pushed aside the Khoi and San in what is today Zimbabwe, and then down into the Eastern Cape and around to the Great Fish River, won that land by conquest. That's the sands of history. And then Europeans who arrived in the Western Cape and built a life there, and the colored community grew out of that. Those folks have built a life, and that's lost to sands of history. So 1910 is a particularly important date. It's interesting. I like you say colonialism has to end, because the argument is that with the exception of Western Sahara, colonialism is over in Africa, but apparently not. So maybe we need to get people to adjust the narrative a little bit.
Absolutely right. Yeah, you know, and I mean, the government is so selective in its view of history. You know, one of the greatest, in fact, the greatest loss of Black life in this part of Southern Africa was at the hands of, as you spoke about, one of the greatest military leaders, and that was Shakazulu. Shakazulu in the Mfukane, depending on historical accounts, the number of Black lives that were lost there was anywhere from 1 to 2 million. Yep. I mean, these numbers are absolutely huge. Those Zulus demolished their enemies. And obviously it's a big sore point in South Africa's history for the other tribes who got annihilated by the Zulus. But yeah, you know, would the ANC then say to the Zulus, okay, well, I'm sorry, you need to get out of KwaZulu-Natal and go back north where you came from, because the methods you used to take over KwaZulu-Natal were untoward.
No, it's if we're talking about the Mfukane, it's absolutely catastrophic in terms of the reshaping of everything in Southern Africa, in South Africa in particular, but not just there, because it carried across the Swaziland, southern Mozambique, and of course into what became Zimbabwe, because Mzilikazi raided the Basotho, the Griquas, and of course the Swana peoples, and they had enough of it. They were hot fun. So when the Trek Boers showed up, in many cases they allied with them, and they fought, and they chased Mzilikazi north of Limpopo, and so the whole history is affected. But when you look at this, in 1911, when the first census was done under the Union of South Africa, there were about 5 million people, over 5 million people in South Africa. About 4 million of them were Black Africans. Or no, I'm sorry, is that right? Something like that. Anyway, but if you look at 1 to 2 million people wiped out a century prior to that, less than a century prior to that, that's an astonishing number of people. I mean, that is on epic scale worse than the 30 Years' War or the 100 Years' War in Europe. That's just astonishing. The cultural, the human impact of what happened in Mfukane, which seems to be completely forgotten in the history narrative of South Africa today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's worse than that even. You know, you spoke about you know, the development of the Cape culture, the majority population in the Cape, which is Cape colored, and the Afrikaans language, which is a confluence of different cultures, different languages. It's a beautiful expression of what the Cape is. And you know, the reason we have a majority colored population in the Cape is because when the Dutch arrived in 1652, there were only males on the boats. And then as a trade route and a slave route, the Dutch married the slaves and the local inhabitants, And this became the seed of what is today the Cape colored population, which is now the over 50% of the Cape. So, and the Afrikaans language, which is spoken by whites and coloreds in the Cape, is a representation of this. So it's very different. And another thing that's very interesting, if you look at the map of South Africa and you look at the different rivers, you'll see that the Khoisan names for a number of these rivers exist in all the Cape areas. But if you move out of the Cape, you see that they've got the Nguni and Bantu names. And one of the Khoisan word for Khoza was dangerous man. The Khoisan were terrified of the Khozas because they were absolutely wiping these people out. And now, because it's politically convenient for the ANC to say, oh, no, Khoisan and colored people are black people, even though they get discriminated just as much as whites and Indians and Asians, in this current ANC regime, to fit their agenda to take over the Cape. These people that historically were being murdered and driven out of the northern parts of South Africa by the Nguni and the Bantu tribes, the Khoisan were terrified of those tribes because they were being slaughtered by them. So the Cape has always been a far more racially harmonious part of Southern Africa, if you look at it compared to the other parts of South Africa. And you can see this in our majority population here. We've been living together peacefully for many, many years. We speak a common language, and the colored population is a beautiful representation of that harmoniousness.
Folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa on the Adaba Africa channel. Today, my special featured guest is Jack Miller, who is the leader of the Cape Party. That's a political party registered in South Africa that stands for elections. And Jack, let me just recap a few things here that we've discussed, and then we'll kind of shift a little bit and talk about recent events in Brackenfell, if you don't mind. But let's see. So you have a political party, came up with this concept around 2007, became registered. You stood in the 2009 elections, had a small showing, but you had a showing. And then again, 2014, 2019, and your party is focused on autonomy for the Cape, and also ultimately looking towards secession to make that a reality, a possibility as well. You talked about one path you see to this is that for the DA to lose its outright majority in the Western Cape and need a coalition partner, and you would be a willing coalition partner provided they would call for a referendum to have Cape secession, which seems to be very important to your party. So I think I've captured that in a nutshell about what's going on. Do you all have a plan in motion now? I ask this. It's not a setup. I'm just going to let you know that. I've been highly critical of all opposition parties. Now, I've never called your party out in particular, but I have called out the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, and also not so much UDM, but IFP, the Dakota Freedom Party, because I've told people that the moment that the lockdown was eased back in June or July, I forget now, the months are just blending together, and people weren't locked in their homes anymore. Of course, in townships, they never were. After they murdered Collins Kosa and 11 other black South Africans, they pulled back in the townships and just let the virus run rampant. But everyone else in the country was locked down. After they eased the restrictions, I said, now is the time. Not 90 days before the municipal elections in 2021. Now is the time. Your party, not you, Jack, but your party, anyone in the party, your party must be out in the townships now. It must be in the Cape Flats. It must be out in Alexandria. It must be in the countryside, telling people your message, recruiting, putting banners up, meeting people, building a party's base, and showing the feckless ANC how they kept 11 million tobacco users, many of whom are addicted to nicotine, from having access to legitimate, safe cigarettes, paying 10 times the price for dodgy criminal enterprises, if they could even get them. How they banned 23 million South Africans who like their drink, who can't drink any alcohol, whether it's Castle Lago or Cape Wines or Chibuku, whatever it is that people like. How they banned the sale of open-toed shoes, because we all know, Jack, that the big toe is the primary vector for COVID-19. Watch out for the big toe. Woo. And of course, the Minister of No Trade there, Ibrahim Patel, the genius that he is, banned e-commerce because, of course, we don't want people congregating. And what's the best way to still have commerce and still keep the economy going? Well, we'll ban e-commerce, even though no one ever goes into a store for e-commerce. The list goes on and on. My point here is that it's so easy to show how ludicrous the ANC has been, but people have short-term memories, whether they're South Africans or they're Americans or they're Germans. They forget the slights, many of them. Now, the 3 million people that don't have jobs probably aren't going to forget that anytime soon, or those who never received any money on the unemployment insurance fund. They've been denied that because they're minorities unlawfully. But my point is that do you guys, because I've seen a little bit of rumblings from Freedom Front Plus, they're doing a little bit, but the other parties say they're doing things, but of course I'm not on the ground. But anecdotal evidence I'm seeing is people aren't out trying to convince people of the failures of the ANC. I think this is a slam dunk. It's easy to convince people. It ought to be easy to grow your party. I don't know about your thoughts, but this is why I'm asking. It's a big buildup. Do you think you have a great chance of increasing the size of your party in 2021? I would think on the surface of it, you may have a good chance here if you put the effort in.
Absolutely. Absolutely huge. I think next year is going to be massive for us. The biggest mistake the ANC ever did was to put us in this horrific lockdown, to destroy the economy, to tell us we're all in this together, get a 500 billion rand loan, and then steal half of it. People are absolutely sick and tired of it. They tell us we can't work, and yet the government, they can't get Eskom to get the lights on and water coming out the taps, and infrastructure's falling apart. The education system's a mess. We've got economic junk status. It's just endless. So the irony is the ANC destroying the country, the EFF rolling up into Brackenfell, calling innocent school kids racist when there was absolutely nothing racist about what happened in Brackenfell. These things are all things which force people to get out of their comfort zone and go, wait a second, this is not a rainbow nation. This is not what we were promised. And unless we do something serious about it, we're heading for destruction. And the Cape Party, we would not have formed if the DA and the ANC and all other political parties out there were doing their job. We saw an absolutely gaping vacuum in politics where just the politicians and these political parties were simply there to get their bread buttered, to get their pensions at the end of their tenure. And none of them seem to be taking the problems in this country seriously. And I think now, after 13 years ago, people thought we were crazy calling for Cape independence. Now, 26 years after ANC rule, the Cape Party is looking like one of the most sane options out there. So we think we're going to do very well. We're very happy to see that a number of other entities, non-political as well as political, are now coming around to the idea of Cape independence, the primary issue that we've been pushing for 13 years. So, we're feeling very good about next year. I think it's going to be a stormer for us, and the beginning of shifting the tide against this tyranny and destruction, and beginning the first real big steps towards Cape independence.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because a little bit ago, a message from Adrian Conrad, he said, "Hey, Jack, when are we handing out Cape Independence pamphlets at traffic lights again? People used to laugh at us. Now independence is a reality," says Adrian. So interesting there. Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy, just the whole situation. Now, I saw you on was it SABC or maybe it was Newsroom, I think it was, maybe, with Wandile from the Economic Freedom Fighters. Wow, what a foul-mouthed, disrespectful little troll that clown is. You did a great job holding your tongue there. It's one reason why I wanted to have the channel. You're obviously I called you a buffoon on television. Interesting. You never said anything about him or against him, and nothing racial, nothing biased, nothing bigoted. At least that was my interpretation of it. And he just lost his crap. He just lost it. But much credit to you for keeping your cool in that conversation. Although, so you might have found it, I don't know, maybe just entertaining to listen to him. That was quite a discussion. That was after Brackenfell. You guys were both on TV.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I guess it was probably entertainment for people that were watching it. And it's frankly, it's sad, and I've got good friends in business, Black people that are absolutely, they're embarrassed. They say, Jack, I'm embarrassed about the EFF.
Should be.
I think, as whites and coloreds, we kind of, people think that the EFF likes to throw their weight around like they speak on behalf of all Black people.
No.
And for all those good, moral Black people out there that think the EFF is crazy, this is incredibly embarrassing. It's the EFF exposed themselves as just being completely tyrannical, unwilling to negotiate, unwilling to be reasonable. I'd very happily, and that's what I said in the interview, I'd very happily chat to him about what our policies are. I tried to identify points, at least the points of departure where we could agree on. We could agree the ANC hasn't done a good job, and we could agree that poverty is a massive problem in the country. So now there's a point for us to start a discussion. So he would not even engage me on that. So, I think, and that's the big problem, because I think that we have policies which would largely eradicate poverty in South Africa. One of our greatest examples is Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, who took this muddied island with different religions, different ethnicities that were at each other's throats for many generations, and turned it into one of the highest incomes per capita, lowest unemployment, highest standards of living countries in the world. So Singapore is a true model. And they also suffered under colonialism, just like we did here in South Africa. And so if they can do it, well, it's time for us to start taking some responsibility. And after 26 years of ANC rule, to think that they still blame the Nats for everything that's going wrong in this country now is just unacceptable. So yeah, the EFF, that guy, I think he did a perfect job of representing the EFF. These people are incapable of engaging rationally and reasonably. But I think that's going to be to their own detriment, because we actually got a number of messages from Black people who just said, look, that EFF guy was appalling, and we support you. So no, I think the chickens will come home to roost.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing is, they don't want cogent conversation. They don't want genuine discourse. They want to distort, lie, manipulate. And quite frankly, now, Jack, you don't have to answer this. Don't weigh in this. This is me. And it's very clear. No one misquote this. I'm the person who is clearly saying here that this is a domestic terrorist organization masquerading as a political party. They're not interested in political discourse. They seek to create a race war. They seek to bifurcate South Africans based on ethnicity. And they lie about every single thing they talk about. I saw an EFF clown show up on a commercial farmer's land, and the farmer's holding up his mobile recording it because he was concerned that this might be misconstrued. And the guy says, you must get out of here. You've stolen this land. And the farmer said, I bought this land. And he said, the ANC bought all the land in this country in 1994. You are a thief. You are a land thief. You are a land thug. And he brought 5 people with him to occupy and steal the guy's farm. And he said, I bought this land 30 years ago. Exactly. The ANC didn't buy anything. But these are the false narratives they tell their willing sheep who have abysmal education levels, courtesy of the African National Congress's worse than Bantu education system. I mean, Jack, are people not embarrassed? I mean, you don't have to answer. How can people not be embarrassed that the passing score to enter university is 30%? I mean, that's not passing anything. Oh, good God. I mean, you can't pass a traffic light at 30%. You're going to get hit. Come on, man. I mean, if you go through a robot at 30%, that's a pretty good chance you're going to get hit sideswiped. That's just insane. This is insane. But back to we'll switch to Brackenfell just a second here. But there was one thing I wanted in the chat. I want to catch here. Hank Adrianzay said that ANC voters have already forgotten the lockdown. When elections are here, they'll only see free T-shirts and KFC. Listen, I know they'll hand out Streetwise meals. That's fine, and it's great for KFC sales. I'll be buying KFC stock in advance of the election next year. But seriously, here's the deal. KFC belongs to PepsiCo anyway. But here's the deal. That's why I'm saying that political parties must be on the street now. And they should have been on the street since June. If you're not out now, see, this is a problem that people have the world over. They wait until right before an election and go try to convince people. It's too late. It has to be part of your ethos. It has to be part of the people you want to be part of your party, supporting it and doing it all the time. Okay, let's switch to Brackenfell. So Brackenfell, they show up against a purported racist thing that they claim, which is all nonsense, as we've seen. It's been disproven, debunked. But nonetheless, they show up and they make a bunch of noise in front of school, harassing. By the way, that's illegal. It's against South African law to assemble in front of a school and protest. It violates the South African law. So they all should have been arrested the first time for that. Then parents rock up there, emotional. The EFF throws rocks at them. Of course, those videos aren't shown. Only ones of white people beating up black people, which was horrific imagery, to say the least. And then the Pan-African Congress shows up after it a few days later, the next week. Anyway, it just goes on for a week and a half or so. And then the EFF wants to come protest. Well, this foolish judge in the Western Cape grants them the permission to protest outside of Brackenfell High School, provided there are 100 people, they maintain their social distance, and they don't disrupt the students. Well, how can you not disrupt the students when you're chanting and toy-toying? But anyway, all that aside, every person from the EFF who showed up there should be arrested as a criminal, in my view, because they showed up with between 3,000 and 5,000 people. And for the people who are going to tell me, no, it wasn't 3,000 to 5,000, what's your bona fides for estimating crowds? That was part of my profession as in the military. That the crowd, from the imagery that I saw, was at least 3,000 to 5,000 people. No social distancing, toy-toying like they were a Zulu impi marching on and to attack somebody. Many of them carrying knob carries, pangas, and golf clubs. Those are weapons. That's not a peaceful assembly. Everything that they were supposed to do, they violated, and then they want to cry the victim. And then Julius Malema comes out and threatens the police and their families. This guy is dangerous. He's been dangerous since he was in the ANC Youth League, and they tolerate him because he's a useful idiot. He is fast approaching the point in which he's going to get a Zimbabwe-like end to his existence in an unexplained traffic accident. Julius Malema died today. That's going to happen at some point if he keeps his nonsense up. Even Beckett Sile, who is, I think, clearly in collusion and league with this guy, is now angry. So the EFF is showing themselves for what they are. There are race merchants, they're bigots, they're hate-filled people. And I'm not saying all the people that show up in those rallies are. Those are mostly useful idiots who they go and pick up, because none of those people are from Brackenfell, not a single one of them from the EFF, and probably none of them are even from the Western Cape. Anyway, so let's talk about Brackenfell, Jack. That's my take on it. If you want to comment on that, I'll give you a chance, but I don't know if you want to comment. That was kind of inflammatory, but accurate. Anyway, so
I think that was a good intro. We've gone over this in detail over the last sort of 2 weeks, but for those who maybe aren't familiar with it, invitations were sent out to every single student in the matric class of all skin colors, black, white, colored. And the parents who organized it, they had obviously costs to cover the event. It was a private thing. First of all, so it's private. So it's got nothing to do with the school itself. It's not an official school event. Invitations were sent to all students of all skin colors. To cover the costs of it, the parents had to charge a 500 Rand entrance fee, and only those students that either wanted to go or were willing to pay the 500 Rand ended up going. I believe the parents put together some sort of event to try and do fundraising for kids who couldn't even make it. So, I mean, when you actually go through the facts, it is so ridiculous. These parents bent over backwards. So, for the EFF to come through and trying to make a racial issue out of this, I think once again it's almost perfectly opportune to just expose them for the absolutely intrinsic racist people that these people are. So, we wanted to stand in solidarity with the students, with the parents, and with the residents of Brackenfell, because there was a lot of media that was going out saying, oh, no, these people are racist. And I mean, everything we saw, the facts on the ground were like, this is absolutely rubbish. Mm-hmm. And we never saw any other political party standing up for them. And we want to let people know that, listen, the Cape Party is going to stand up for communities like you in an independent Cape and getting to an independent Cape. So, it's so many communities are just so comfortable with just accepting the status quo, allowing the ANC to do what they want, allowing the EFF to do what they want. And the DA, ACDP, Freedom Front, all of these other groups that should be there fighting for these communities, I think all of them need to realize that the time has come to stand up against these groups. And which is why we said, we're hoping the DA gets underneath 50%. Is the DA our sworn enemy? Well, we're very disappointed with what they've done over their tenure. We're disappointed with all of the political parties that have had an opportunity to push for Cape independence or fight the ANC government on getting a better division of revenue for our taxes, fighting against these racially discriminatory policies here in the Cape. We think they all could have done a better job, which is why we formed the Cape Party. But I'm hoping that at this point, it's obvious to all of these groups, which do not belong to the African nationalists, the DA, the ACDP, the Freedom Front, etc., that these groups will come around to realize that what we've been pushing for the last decade of Cape independence really is the only solution. And we need to get the DA underneath 50%. So if we can get the DA to 40% and the Cape Party has 5 or 6% and the Freedom Front is 5 or 6% and the ACDP, etc., that we would all come together and say, look, enough is enough. The people of the Cape want this. The polling that we've done has shown that it's very popular. And I think as we move forward, it's only going to get more and more popular. And we need to give the people of the Western Cape a referendum on Cape independence. And standing up for the students and the parents of Brackenfell is just that first step of building that Cape unity so that we can forge forward and build the country that we've always wanted.
Well, I that's a great comment, but not to break the stream, but I'm going to have to throw a yellow card, not on you, Jack, but on CR in the chat. CR says, Jack is so hot. So there's a yellow card right there. Sorry. There's your first warning, CR. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a challenge, is it not? I mean, you have I did a presentation as part of the Great Decisions lecture series, which is something the Ivy League schools start here in the States. U.S. Army War College is a participant in that. They bring in lecturers to talk about topics. A panel selects the topics each year. 2 years ago in 2018, the topic was South Africa's fragile democracy. And they asked me to speak about it. I was the director of African Studies at War College, so it was a natural choice, but also I know a lot about South Africa, so it was apropos. So I gave this presentation, and I told people, I said, well, a lot of people are concerned about South Africa. I have my concerns, but the one thing is that traditionally, over the past few decades, it's had strong institutions, and these institutions oftentimes have been the bulwark against state expansion or state misconduct and that sort of thing. I said, but we seem to be losing that, so I'm concerned, but I haven't lost hope yet. Well, that was 2 years ago. And I wasn't caught up in Ramaphosa. I never bought that. He's not a successful businessman. You give me $390 million, 26 years later, trust me, it'll be more than $450 million. It'll be $1 billion in 26 years. That's not a very successful businessman in my book. That's just someone handing you wealth and you did nothing with it. I mean, you can make more money putting your money in the bank and earning interest on it than what he's made in the last 26 years. Also, he was complicit in Zuma's government. He was his deputy president, on the board of the company responsible for Marikana, and everybody just looks the other way, and they all got excited about it. But I wasn't blinded by Ramaphosa. I said he has a chance. If he's legitimate and he's serious, he has a chance to turn South Africa around, but it's getting to the end of the game. We're running out of time here. It's almost the 78th minute, using a rugby reference there, but 78th minute here. We're running out of time, and there isn't going to be extra time in this one. So here we are, 2 years later, and everything I projected is pretty much coming true. It's really, really sad. But the build up for that, Jack, is I want to say that you have all these institutions now that are captured. The ridiculous South African Human Rights Commission is anything but human rights. They have no interest in the brutal torture, mutilation, gang rape, breasts being sliced off, genitals being cut off, babies being boiled in tubs. These aren't fictional stories. These are true about farm murders and rural murders, and they have no interest in that whatsoever. Yet the moment that some clown gets drunk in a club in the Northern Cape or in the Western Cape and tries to intimidate Eben Etzebeth, now that's a stupid maneuver. I wouldn't try that. And he tries to intimidate Eben Etzebeth. They open an inquiry into Eben Etzebeth's racism, which is fictional only in their minds. And now they're opening up inquiries into Brackenfell's over racism, when the facts are out there publicly available. There's no need for an investigation. If anything, actually, someone posted that, and I said, I'm with you 100%. I agree. The South African Human Rights Commission absolutely must open a case about racism at Brackenfell. Please tell them to go to EFF party headquarters and start interviewing all the racists who were present at the intimidation rally.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, yeah, I know that was a joke. It's hard to find humor. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting what's been happening in this country for the last 26 years. And started with Mbeki disbanding the commandos, and intentionally disarming the farming community. And the police are hours away when these farm attacks happen. No, it's, I mean, anyone who's ever Googled, South African farm murders, it's disgusting. You can't sleep for weeks and it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific.
But Jack, nobody's safe. I mean, King Goodwill Zwelithini, the Zulu king, his son was just murdered at the beginning of this month. I mean, by gangsters. I mean, nobody's safe in this country. Brett Kebble, who was deep in with the ANC, is assassinated in broad daylight. In Santon, the ritziest, most upscale part of Africa, and he's shot in broad daylight, assassinated. Nobody's safe in South Africa. It's really scary.
100% right, and I'm not saying that crime is not a huge issue for everyone in South Africa, but you brought up how the Human Rights Commission will say, okay, Brackenfell School is racist, or Espeth, is racist. When you look at what's happening in this country, there is zero way that you can look at what's happening on South African farms and not say it's absolute racism. You spoke about boiling babies alive. The police arrive in the houses, and on the wall in blood is written, kill the Boer, and far worse things than that. How can you tell me that is not an absolutely racially motivated murder? It's absolutely horrific. So if we're talking about race, let's talk about crime second. But if we're talking about racism in this country and who the guilty parties are, how the EFF, as you mentioned, has not been disbanded, has not been ruled illegal, has not even been ruled a terrorist organization for the things that they say, considering what is actually happening in this country, is it's beyond belief. And that hangs over the head of the Human Rights Commission and the various organizations. It hangs over the head of the South African government, the ANC, and all the organizations in South Africa who turn a blind eye to this. And to your second point, crime, absolutely. Crime is out of control in this country. And whether you're black, white, colored, Indian, or Asian, we're all victims to it. And it just needs to come to an end, when you've got 500 billion rand coming into the country for COVID relief, and half of that's getting stolen, and the police aren't getting paid proper salaries, and the government's disbanding private organizations that actually are effective at fighting a crime. You've got to wonder, do these people actually want this place to be the crime capital of the world? They're doing damn right everything that they can to make it so. So, this is where we want a true rainbow nation here in the Western Cape. These are issues which, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. We can stand together on this and go, you know what, this has to come to an end. So no, I really agree with you there.
But Jack, I'm going to have to correct you. You see, Jack, I've heard it from the horse himself. Cyril Ramaphosa has told me on a national broadcast that you must understand that the nature of white people is that they're racist. And this is why we have gender-based violence in South Africa, because of white toddlers who are convincing black men to rape and murder their partners. There's your answer right there, Jack. You must open your eyes. Sorry, it's just, I can't help that. I can't believe he actually said that on a national broadcast. I heard it. Gentleman Inflatables, now here, this is a little concern for you, Jack, if you want your party to do well. Gentleman Inflatables says, I've never seen Cape Party in my area of Cape Town. And anecdotally, Jack, I've only been to Cape Town twice in recent history, and I don't recall seeing anything from the Cape Party. That you can't expect to have your sign on every corner. But my point is that maybe you should get with your PR folks, and we'll take a look at that. If you want, I'll ask General Inflatables offline where he's at and find out where in Cape Town, so maybe it could become a focus area for you. And then Elizabeth gave a super chat. She said, "Can you ask Jack what his thoughts are on the 2.2 billion rand investment in Cape Town, the Western Cape? What's it for? Concerned that the DA is going the same route and selling us out to big tech." I'm not sure what she's talking about. Are you familiar with that 2.2 billion rand investment? Is this a FDI deal or something? Foreign direct investment?
I'm not familiar with that either. Maybe you can ask her what.
She followed up. She forgot to mention. She did another super chat because she forgot to mention it's a Google investment. Yeah, I think she might be talking about Google and Microsoft as part of the investment in DABA. I don't think he called it that, but the investment in DABA that Cyril Ramaphosa had like 2 years ago. Or almost 2 years ago, that Microsoft, Google, and Ford, I think, also announced they were going to do foreign direct investment in South Africa. And I think Cape Town was going to be one. I guess the 2.2 billion must be coming from that. Elizabeth, I would be suspicious if it's money coming from Google. Yes, I'm on a Google platform right now, but anyway. So, do you know anything about that investment in Cape Town? I'd heard about it, but I've heard nothing in like over a year.
Well, I think let me answer this question as well as the question before there. I chatted to my friends in the DA. It was after the 2019 elections, and we were talking about budgets, and they told me that they had a budget of 1.2 billion rand the ANC had a budget of 2 billion rand, and to this gentleman who hasn't seen us, well, we survive. We're a grassroots organization. We survive on donations from our members and supporters. And I think we had a budget in that election of something about 200,000 rand. So we're just to try and get posters in every single poll, to try and the cost of TV ads, radio ads, newspaper ads, etc. These things are incredibly expensive. So we really rely on word of mouth, social media, donations from people. So the key thing is everyone who does know about this vision and dream of an independent Cape and supports it, if they can please tell their friends, tell their neighbors, tell their friends to join us on Facebook. Just give us, if you can support us with 50 rand a month, that's a case of beer a month, just help out wherever you can. It really makes a big difference. So that would be to answer the first question. The second is, we have had huge concerns with the DA. I mean, never mind this particular incident in 2010 with the World Cup. We got the budget for building the Greenpoint Stadium. And, once all of the taxes had been funneled off into this, which was completely controlled by the DA, it was 4 or 5 times more expensive than what they duped the taxpayer into accepting in the first place. So the DA is absolutely just as guilty as the ANC when it comes to, issues of corruption like this. So we need to hold them to account. Look at the ex-mayor of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille. I mean, she changed De Waal Road to Philip Khosana, which is a Pan-African Congress extremist, an African nationalist extremist. So here's the DA mayor changing our road names. And why De Waal? There was nothing wrong with De Waal. He wasn't, any apartheid, sympathize or this or that. And here you have the DA mayor changing street names to these African nationalists. We had to fight a court case where the DA had, forced a cell phone tower up right in front of a school creche. The community didn't want it, but they forced it through anyway. The water crisis, etc., the increasing taxes. We have some of the highest taxes, if not the highest taxes in South Africa. When the DA took over. So look, there's a lot of things that we need to hold the DA accountable for. They should have done a better job of fighting for the best interests of the people of the Cape. They've been absolutely hell-bent on trying to win the ANC electorate. So they've adopted ANC policies. In fact, many people are calling them ANC light. We need to hold them to account just as much as we need to hold other political parties to account. And which is why we're hoping that for all of those good people in the DA, and there are many good people, I've got many good relationships with people in the DA, but it doesn't mean that they don't have some serious problems, which is why the voters need to say, listen, we pay a tremendous amount of taxes here in the Cape. We do not want to live under these discriminatory ANC policies, and we expect more from our government. And let's knock the DA under 50. Let's get them to 40, 45%, whatever it might be. And let's see what we can do with the Cape Party filling in the space there. We don't need to be the majority party. We just need to hold the balance of power. And we could do so with a few percent. And by doing that, we could literally push forward that referendum, which would solve many of the problems that we're facing at the moment. And the DA has promised us this. In the last election, they said they would push for a provincial police force. Well, where is it? They have the power to call a referendum. Do it. Then they must do it. And if they're not going to do it, we need to punish them at the ballot box and get them under 50%. So that's our great call. Let's stand together and force them to be accountable to us, the voters and the taxpayers.
Well, if you're interested, folks, in the Cape Party and you want to learn about it, below this video, there are links to their Facebook page, to their website, to their Twitter account, and even a description on Wikipedia. Of course, I urge caution, even as an author on Wikipedia. I urge caution when you read Wikipedia things. Not always the best editing there, but a good source for esoteric information. But in this case, you don't need to go to Wikipedia. You can find it from the party itself. But folks are welcome to check it out. No, absolutely. You talk about, well, before I get, folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa on the sorry, I just got that in my ear, just that sound from the Super Chat. But you're listening to Chris White Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. My special featured guest today is Jack Miller, who is the leader of the Cape Party, located in the Western Cape. And we're talking about events there. We talked about Brackenfell a little bit earlier, also about the party, what it's all about, and their path. Now, Jack, and I'll get to the Super Chat in just a second. Well, I'll get to it now. But Tertius LaRue says, where can I buy a case of beer for 50 Rand? Asking for a friend. Okay, well, I think Jack was embellishing slightly there. Okay, we're not going to hold his feet to the fire on that one. But what I will say is that 50 Rand is not a lot. Listen, you can become a member of Chris White Africa for only 9 Rand 99 if you're in South Africa. That's less than 62 cents US for membership. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, that's Jack was making a point there. It's okay. It's a little more than 50 Rand for a case, but we'll leave it at that. Jack, I got another Super Chat here. I'll get to it shortly, but the role you're looking at playing is kind of like the Free Democrats, the FDP in Germany. And the FDP in Germany traditionally has long been a party that never really polled, I'm not saying you'll never get there, but they never polled above 8% of the electorate. They're usually between 5 and 8 or 9%, and they were the kingmaker. They decided which governments rose and which governments fell. If the CDU wanted to be in power, they needed the Democrats, the Free Democrats, the FDP, because they couldn't get in power without a coalition. So it sounds like you're comfortable with a niche role, at least in the near term, to get to your ultimate objective, which is a referendum on secession.
Yes, we aren't professional politicians. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years, so it kind of feels like it. But we really are just normal people that we're taxpayers, we're business people, we're concerned citizens. And essentially, you could say that the Cape Party is a bunch of concerned citizens who got together, formed a political organization because we were so disillusioned with where the country was going. I have no intention, I have no desire to be the president of the Cape Republic. In fact, we don't believe there should be a president. In fact, if you look at how Switzerland runs, there is no president. They've got a presidential council of 7, and that rotates on an annual basis. And no one should care who the president is. The Presidential Council should be accountable to the voters who, as we mentioned earlier, will decide how the country is run through referendums, initiatives, recall, nullification, and voluntary secession. So we need to move away from these failed centralized political systems. And the Cape Party is a tactical vehicle to achieve that. And frankly, having been in politics for the last 13 years, I remember when our deputy leader, Adrian Kay, and myself, we went to our first radio debate. We were much younger back then, and we saw we were up against the DA and the ANC. This was in 2008. And we were petrified. We were absolutely petrified. Here are these two young kids in their early 20s, going up against these heavyweights in the DA and the ANC. And the radio went live and the questions started coming in, and the debate opened up. And here we were, Adrian and I, we absolutely wiped the floor with these people. These people are incompetent. They are useless. You think that because they're in government that they have some special capabilities. These people are pathetic. And if you want this country well run, it's actually civic organizations that are far more effective at running things than these politicians. So the Cape Party, look at us like a grassroots vehicle of business people, concerned citizens, charitable organizations who just want to fix this mess. And all we need is to hold the balance of power. We hypothetically, if the DA had 49% and the Cape Party had 2%, that would be enough. With as little as 2%, we could change the entire trajectory of history and put the Cape on a pathway towards peace and prosperity.
Let me hit a couple of real quick there, Jack. A couple comments that are coming in. First off, I think it's probably good that you came on today, not just so that I got to learn something more about the Cape Party and we got a chance to talk about it, but I saw here that Mr. Mala 5 says never knew about Cape Party before now, and it looks promising. And then Elizabeth gave another super chat, and she said, Jack, perhaps you should go full-blown streaming and videos and independent media like the DA did during lockdown. It worked for them to do the same. I don't know how well it worked for the DA. I mean, I've tuned in and watched like 1,100 people watching some of those live streams that they had. That's not a lot for a party that it gets 3 million voters in a national election. But yeah, your point I think is well taken, Elizabeth, especially for a small party like the Cape, using alternative media or having some sort of production like that may be helpful. So there's a suggestion from Elizabeth that makes a little bit of sense. And then Gerhard Roos told Janine, said, secession is illegal as per the Constitution of South Africa. How will they get around that? Well, actually, I think you're mistaken, Gerhard. It's not. Now, in Spain, Catalonia had a problem because it is clearly in the Constitution of Spain that is forbidden for them to break away from the country. But that is not the case in South Africa, unless I missed something, Jack. Have I missed something?
You have not at all. Section 235 of the South African Constitution guarantees our right to self-determination. And even better than that, there are far more explicit clauses in the African Union charters and the United Nations charters, which South Africa is a bound signatory to. And even more than that, our ex-ANC president Thabo Mbeki was the primary negotiator and driving force for the independence movement in southern Sudan. He oversaw that entire process, and you have many quotes from him showing his support and favor for self-determination and all the legal principles which secure it. So no, it's absolutely legal. And then more so, we had an issue. We mentioned the Abutembu tribe earlier. The Abutembu king, he was calling for the independence of the Eastern Cape a few years back. And you had your usual ANC bullhorns there sort of saying that, oh no, this is illegal, this is treason. And the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, came out and said, this is a political matter. They passed a ruling on this saying this was a political matter. Secession is a political matter. So it's absolutely not illegal. In fact, we're in a far better position here in South Africa to take the legal pathway to independence than, as you mentioned, Catalonia. They've got a far harder route than we do because we've got far more legal conditions which support and protect this right.
Jack, before we get out of here for the day, I did want to cover a couple other things. It sounds like your big concern, we haven't said this, but I say it frequently on my channel, is that you're really concerned about tyranny of the majority. That's your concern in the context you're in South Africa, and you have this tyranny of the majority. We haven't really talked about expropriation of compensation, but South Africa, of course, is a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantees property rights. They are a member of the World Trade Organization, which advocates for property rights, and they are a participant in the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which they're now violating and should be kicked out of, in my view. The United States should kick South Africa out of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which will affect $20 billion in imports and exports to the U.S., to and from the U.S., because they have put this on the table, the expropriation without compensation, and which means they're abrogating property rights. And one of the key elements of AGOA is that you must recognize and respect property rights, or you can't participate in it. So I think that's we may get to that in a second, but there's one more thing I want to cover, and then you can talk about any of these three if you like. And this one is that there was a discussion here about the water. You mentioned water, and then I think Gerhard, somebody, let me see who this was real quick. Sorry here. I got a note here. So I'll make sure I attribute this to the right person. It was Gert Janssen van Rensburg, says he disagrees with the Jack reference. All water issues are under national control. Actually, that's not true. Water is a national, provincial, and local responsibility. There are different responsibilities within South Africa. But as I've told people, the situation in Western Cape, and in Cape Town in particular, is a consequence of the failure of the National Party, the African National Congress for the brief period that it ruled the Western Province, and also the Democratic Alliance. And what we're talking about here is that while people are running around talking about climate change, oh, Greta, ooh, you've killed all of us. Yes, Greta, please take your medicine. Anyway, but when they're talking about climate change, while climate change may affect rainfall in the Western Cape and have a contributing factor, the reason for Cape Town's water crisis a couple years ago was not climate change. It was piss poor water management by the National Party, the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, who have failed to make use of brown water. So instead they're using fresh, clean water that's been treated out of the taps to water lawns and golf courses and grass outside of shopping malls. It's the tragedy of the commons, which public taps sit in townships and are left running by car washers who come along, fill the bucket up, and just leave it running, and millions of gallons of water are wasted. It's also lack of imagination. It's also the fact that 30-40% of all water that come in from the reservoirs and come up from wells and water catchment areas is lost through leaky pipes that haven't been replaced in decades. So all of that is the responsibility of all of those parties. And it starts at the national level, but it is also provincial and local responsibility. So I don't know if you want to weigh any of those, tyranny of the majority, EWC, or the water issue. Jack, you want to touch any of those or all of them?
No, I'm just wondering if you would like a job at the Cape Party. You handled that perfectly.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a South African, but maybe if you don't mind foreign intrusion in your elections, I'm your man. No, I discovered a few days ago, Jack, that all this brouhaha about Dominion software. And I was like listening, but there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and I don't see the software, I didn't see the code, I didn't see the machines, so I'll listen. But I'm kind of like Harry Truman from Missouri. You got to show me, so I'm waiting for them to show me. But I found out from my own representative the other day that my county is one of the counties that had Dominion software to count the ballots. Now I'm interested. I didn't know that. When I took my ballot, they made me fill out a piece of paper and write on the paper in a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, which fades right through the paper. And you turn over, it's on the other side. And they had me fill it out and then walk over and put it in a machine. And I watched it count my ballot, but I don't know if it counted the votes correctly because you can't see. It's all done by machine. So now I also have questions about this Dominion thing because so anyway, but the reason I mentioned that is back to the foreign interference is that Dominion is a Toronto-based foreign entity that is counting the ballots in an American election. How bizarre is that? I mean, I'll tell you what. So if that works here, then I'll create my own software company. And in the Western Cape next year for municipal elections, I'll count your ballots if you guys give me the contract.
I trust you, Chris. I'm sure you'll get the right result.
Oh, I will. Even if I lose, I get the right result. Integrity is what matters here. Anyway, those are all issues here that are legitimate issues. I think the EWC is a really scary thing. Jack, let me get your take on this before we head out. I've cautioned people from the outset with expropriation without compensation. Number one, it's very real that it may actually happen, but I still am a little bit reticent to believe the ANC is actually going to go through with it, making it the law of the land or enforcing it in the fashion that they've claimed. Because every year it came up in the parliament for the past 20 years. And every year, without fail, the ANC, which had the majority in parliament, voted it down. One of their members or one of the minority parties would bring it up and they'd vote it down until they started losing voters to the EFF. When they started losing voters to the EFF, they saw a threat and they decided to take a populist position. And suddenly in 2017, they're all in favor of expropriation without compensation. And the problem with this is that, I tell people, is that I don't think they're the least bit genuine. This is virtue signaling. And if they do it, they'll do it because they're just trying to pill for money. Because people are focused overwhelmingly laser focused on expropriation without compensation about farmland and about land. And sure, that's part of it, but that's not the real reason behind it if they're going to do it for real. They're doing it for real because they want to use it as a political weapon. Just look at this situation. Let's say I own a business and I live in Kraaifontein, which, by the way, apparently the EFF is going to go there this weekend, but I live in Kraaifontein and I have a business there and I've been speaking out against the ruling party of the day, which, let's say in 10 years, it's the ANC. All they have to do is say to me, listen, if you don't shut up, stop talking on YouTube or quit going on to Twitter and saying bad things about our government, your pension fund is not secure. By the way, did you check your savings account balance today? Where's my money? Well, it's been expropriated. Yeah, but you can't do that. Sure we can. It's legal. Apartheid is legal. So is expropriation without compensation. It will be used as a weapon to silence political critics, is my argument, and to settle scores. And that's my big concern. And I think a lot of people are missing the argument. Yes, let's be concerned about farmland being expropriated from lawful owners with title and deed, but you also need to be worried about this in a more draconian Orwellian sense, that this will be a political weapon to silence opposition. What do you think of that?
It's a very good point. Absolutely, very good point. I don't think that we have a single supporter in the Cape Party that agrees with expropriation without compensation. It really is an issue that is dominated by the EFF and the ANC, and I think that it's not necessarily the same black people that are embarrassed by what the EFF is doing are also appalled at the idea that expropriation without compensation is even being considered in this country. all these people of all skin colors who worked so hard to build up businesses in this country, who pay their taxes, who have bought properties, who want their property values to maintain their value or even go up, we hope, want to raise their kids in a stable country. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. This is so dangerous. And you really hit the nail on the head there. It's a perfect analysis of it. It's far more than just property. This is a political weapon to silence any of your detractors. And it has been used in Africa before. Just look at Zimbabwe. This is incredibly dangerous. And if they go ahead and push through these policies, then South Africa is going to unravel very, very quickly.
Yeah, and just to be clear on that, because I've been a long outspoken critic of the thugocracy or kleptocracy known as ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, going back to before 2000, but particularly when they started expropriating farms. The lies that were told by Robert Gabriel Mugabe and the thugs in ZANU-PF about white racists in Zimbabwe are just horrific and bear repeating and to expose them for the frauds that they are. They claim that the whites came and took the land from them. Okay, well, yeah, there were British settlers who went up in 1890 and then the settler columns, and they did take land. But a fair portion of what was gazetted, sorry, it's a tough one. The Brits say it differently, gazetted or gazetted, as commercial farmland was land that was reclaimed or was made productive after the Second World War by immigrants, primarily from the UK and also from South Africa, who came there and purchased the land. Now, we can make the argument that land was taken from black Zimbabweans. That's a fair argument, and you can talk about redress for that. That's fair. But here's the reality. From the Lancaster House Agreement in 1979, there was a deal between the Brits and the Zimbabweans that between Joshua Nkomo and Mugabe, that what would happen is that the British would provide money so that the government could purchase farmland on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. And that farmland would be distributed to black Zimbabweans and war veterans. But here's the problem. From 1980 to 1993, roughly, the British government gave Zimbabwe 63 million pounds, which today doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it was a lot of money back then. And they did use the money to buy farms. But they gave them to Constantine Chiwengo, Solomon Mujuru, Robert Gabriel Mugabe. You see where this is going. Cape Parry. All these people got these farms, and they just were white elephants, which they lived on, or they rented out as a weekend holiday home, and they had other people farm it for them. So virtually no poor Zimbabweans ever got any land under that money. So finally, the Brits said, enough of this. We're not paying you clowns anymore because you have not lived up to the agreement. So here's the most important piece of this, Jack. From 1980 until 2000, first under Prime Minister Mugabe from 1980 to 1987 when they changed the Constitution, then he became president until he was finally forced out of office in 2017. From 1980 to 2000, 42% of all land that was considered commercial farmland by the government itself changed hands at least one time. Some of it was sold 2, 3, 4, 5 times. That's just the nature of farmland. So if the government of Zimbabwe cared about black Zimbabweans, they could have owned as much as 42% of the commercial farmland legitimately within 20 years. Within 20 years, half the land could have been transferred to black Zimbabweans, but they don't care. Just as the ANC, which has failed to fund the department this year, they're giving billions to a failed, in bankruptcy, business rescue, South African Airways, a white elephant ego, thing for the government. They're giving them billions in Escom. Don't even talk about how much money they're getting. Yet they give $35 million US total for the acquisition of land by the department responsible for that. I can't even buy a wine estate in the Western Cape for that. But the money that was spent on the arms deal, I could have bought 11,639 farms in the Western Cape for average prices. 11,000 farms in the Western Cape alone, if they had taken the $7.1 billion for the arms deal and used it for that. Anyway, that was a long diatribe. Sorry about that, Jack. Didn't mean to go on so long. But but the point is that this is not legitimate. This expropriation is nonsense. It's a means to steal and to intimidate and shut down your political opponents. That's the bottom line. South Africa has a means existing. They have expropriation with compensation. It's just like we have manifest destiny, or not. We have eminent domain here in the U.S. The state can take property if it's a legitimate public purpose, and it's the only way to do it. But they can't take your savings because they have to replace it with an equitable thing because they have to compensate. So if you take R1 million out of your bank account, they got to give you R1 million. They're not going to do that. They can take your farm. They've got to compensate you, but the farm serves a different purpose. Anyway, it's just a really scary thing, and it's totalitarian. George Orwell couldn't have written a novel that was this scary. Animal Farm, 1984, those are just amateur efforts compared to what the ANC has done to South Africa.
The job offer still stands, Chris. Come join us. No, absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. It really is horrific, and Yeah, we could talk for hours and hours on the absolute atrocious things happening in this country that have been happening for the last 26 years, which is, and one should, because some people seem to have their head in the sands, and I don't know how at this point in time that anyone can still have their heads in the sands, because once we've spoken about all this stuff and you come to terms with the reality that we're going one way, let's start to then focus on the positive and go, you know what, how about we get off the sinking ship? How about we build a beautiful, bright, prosperous country? We declare the Cape an independent country, and we found it on the principles of direct democracy, a political system which has made one of the most stable countries in the world, an economic system which took a muddied island in 1965 to one of the most prosperous countries on the planet. That's so exciting, and anyone who's been to the Cape, my goodness, is this not the most beautiful place on earth? So yes, we need to look at all this darkness, look at all this suffering and destruction, and acknowledge it, and come to terms that the only way we're going to fix it is by uniting, by standing together here in the Cape and forging a strong united front against the sinking ship, the ANC and the EFF. We don't need to put up with these people pitching up at our schools and calling us racist and this and that. And, and the students and ex-students of non-white students from Brackenfell saying what a fantastic school it was, and they loved it being there, and they never experienced racism. And, the EFF comes in here and just tries to just create racial conflict. We don't need to put up with this rubbish. For goodness sake, we can have that rainbow nation. And the sooner we realize that, we can have a rainbow nation in a peaceful, prosperous country in the most beautiful place on earth, the Cape of Good Hope. And let's get out there and make it happen. So, I hope if any of your listeners haven't checked out our website, I'd love for them to check it out, www.capeparty.com. Send us an email. We're actually having a march on the 5th of December. Anyone who'd like to join us on that, that'll be fantastic. Next year is going to be huge for us. Spread the word. If you can afford a six-pack of beer, so what's that, around $70-80? That'll be fantastic. Chip that in each month. That helps us to buy T-shirts. That helps us to buy flags. That helps us to pay for the fees to register for elections. All of these things really help. We're really doing the best that we can. As I mentioned, we're just citizens like you, taxpayers like you. So if you want to see this become a reality, please help us. Please join our page. Tell your friends to join our page. Get involved. Chip in if you can, and let's make this happen.
So we have a DA politician who's joined us here in the stream. I was just going to end it up there, Jack, very quickly, but since he popped in, I'll do that. But I was about to ask you for your final comments, but that was pretty awesome comments there. But I must say that Adrian Conradi has said that apparently you bride the best sirloin. I don't know if that's germane to the conversation, but interesting to know. So next time I'm in Cape Town, I'll have to make sure that I get over there. But let me do this. And this, I expected him to come in here and troll, but he didn't troll. It's a legitimate question, Jack. So I'll just throw this out at you. Ronaldo Jos, who's a DA ward councilor in Nelson Mandela Bay, I think you're familiar with him. He said, I really enjoy Jack and think he's a very intelligent guy. Okay, well, that's nice. There's always a but in these sentences. But but how can you be so confident with 9,331 of the votes in 2019, or 0.45% of the vote? That's a small percentage, but the party, as I mentioned, is gained in 3 different elections. And we talked about this earlier, Ronaldo. I don't know if you're here before Jack responds. And that if this isn't Jack's answer, my answer is that anybody, if I go found a political party in South Africa now, I guarantee you I can draw votes next year just by exposing the ANC for what they've done. But Jack, do you want to take that or answer it? Ronaldo's question. It's a relatively small turnout is his argument. And how can you be confident about 2021?
Well, history has a habit of opening up windows of opportunity. And if you look at the way people were talking about Cape independence when we founded in 2007, it wasn't just not interested, it was hostile. People not only thought we were crazy, they thought, what a terrible idea. Do you not believe in the Rainbow Nation? They obviously couldn't see as far in the future as we could. We could see what was coming down the road. And if you look at what's happened in the last year or two, my goodness, I think if you can't see it now, then you're blind. So I think we're going to see huge increases in support in the next elections. As I mentioned earlier, the Cape Party doesn't need to be the majority party. We're not planning to be the biggest dog in the room. You know, we just want to be the one with the most common sense and help to guide people in the right direction. So the DA has no doubt lost their way. I've got a lot of respect for Ronaldo. He's welcome to join us when he comes to his senses. He's got a great podcast. I really enjoy his work. No, and he does fantastic stuff. He brings attention to issues that really need to be brought attention to. So I've got a lot of respect for him. But yeah, you know, maybe if hopefully he can see, let the Cape Party make the DA better. You know, there's a good number of overlap, but there are also areas where the DA, I think we all have to admit, has dropped the ball. So let the Cape Party make the DA better. And, you know, we're hoping to make the DA accountable, get them underneath 50%. They're still going to be the largest party, you know, 45%, 47%, whatever it might be. And, you know, if the Cape Party can get enough support to hold that balance of power, then we really look forward to sitting down with people like Ronaldo, who I think will certainly agree with many things which we're proposing. And, you know, let's fix this mess. It's been too long. We're not heading the right direction. And unless we stand together and push in the only way that we're going to get off the sinking ship, and that really is either greater autonomy or outright Cape independence, we have no choice. The time is now.
Jack, that's a fantastic answer, and we're going to call it there. It's an hour and 30 minutes. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks a lot. I think some good news for you is that it seems like a number of people who tuned in during the stream, over 1,000 people popped in here at one stage or another, didn't know much about the Cape Party. They've learned a little bit about it now, so that's probably good news for you. Ronaldo says... Oh, no, he's responding to someone else. Never mind. But thanks for the question, Ronaldo. And Jack, thanks a lot. I want to thank my guest, Jack Miller, so much for coming in. We didn't even get into the etymology of his surname. It's not very Afrikaans sounding to me, but we could talk about that another date. Not that it has to be. Not that it has to be. But anyway. So, Jack, yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming in. As we talked before, if you can hang around, and I'm going to take you off camera, but just put your mic on mute, and you and I are going to chat about some other issues here. Folks, this has been a conversation with Jack Miller from the Cape Party, a party I'm not affiliated with at the moment. No. Anyway, Jack, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for what you're doing, bringing international attention to what's happening in South Africa. So I really am very grateful for that, and I think many South Africans are. So thank you.
All right, folks, that's it. That's Jack. I'm going to take him off camera right now. He's going to go on mute, and then he and I are going to have a conversation after this about some other issues here, mostly the U.S. election. I think he's curious. Anyway, all right, folks, thanks for tuning in today. Really appreciate your support for this conversation and the audience that showed up. I hope that you've learned something interesting or useful about what's happening with the Cape Party and Cape Secession, and we talked a bit about Brackenfell, which I think was an important conversation too. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back in 2 hours for the Night Owls edition of Stray Voltage. So Stray Voltage Night Owls edition, we'll be talking about a number of issues. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, got a kind of a coup here. Bantu Holomisa will be my guest on the channel probably next week. I'm excited, looking forward to that, from the UDM, from the trans guy, former Major General and leader from that area, who famously broke with the African National Congress over his testimony at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot. God bless. Have a good day. We're going to close out here. We'll catch you in 2 hours here on Chris Wyatt Africa. And thank you very much.